This video's full of crazy neighbor stories, and you're going to love that title story too. Here's our first one.
R/ helped me get my neighbor removed from the city, posted by Midorian. So, I'm not a regular Reddit user. I recently found r/ on YouTube and heard many stories of revenge, pro-revenge, and so on. I'm a very forgiving person, often taken advantage of, but I let it slide. I have one exception. Don't mess with my kids. Quick backstory. My oldest is on the autism spectrum. When we first moved here, 6 years ago, he saw two girls playing next door with some rocks. He knew he wasn't allowed to leave the yard, so he ran around our property, finding the prettiest rocks he could, and threw them at the girls, who ran crying to their mom. I spoke to their mom, who seemed cool, and we resolved the issue peacefully. I thought. Shortly after we moved here, I noticed the neighbor's dog would get out and roam the neighborhood. She was very skittish, so I could never catch her. We live on a busy road, so I was worried and occasionally called animal control to see if they could help her before she got hit. One day, my neighbor's other dog was in our yard. When the kids and I stepped out of the house to go to the car, it snarled and growled. I called the police, and it was a Sunday, so animal control was closed, and they took care of it. The next day, neighbor storms over to me, screaming at me for costing her a lot of money. She blamed me, my husband, her landlord for not fixing the fence, and insisted she had very powerful friends who would crush me if I didn't leave her alone. She screamed over her loss of thousands of dollars, claiming I cost her daughter senior pictures. "You should be more forgiving," she said, "since I should have reported your special kid." Don't mess with my kids. Another quick note. It turns out she would let the dogs out when they were in heat and only let them back in when they were pregnant. They would sell the puppies and repeat. Animal control did what they could, but they couldn't do much. Since watching r/, I became aware of malicious compliance. I read our city's codes and ordinances until I knew them front to back, and I reported her for everything. Cans on the street at 6:01 p.m. and they're required to be in by 6 p.m. Reported. I can hear you from my property. Reported. Grass too high? Reported. I have a massive spreadsheet of times, dates, and violations. Meanwhile, she still let her dogs out. They dug up the neighborhood, pooped everywhere, and got into our trash. Since the one dog was vicious, I couldn't let my kids go outside without me. We felt like prisoners in our own home. The dogs would be outside in all kinds of weather. Ice storms, 100+ degree heat, no water, no food, no shelter. Animal control and I became best friends. They desperately wanted the dogs removed. It reached a point where they drove by her house on the way to and from work. They rescued dozens of puppies, sometimes finding them wandering the road. Where I live, there's a limit to how many times you can report someone within a time frame, and if I walked in to report and they knew I couldn't, they would give a shake of their head, and I would instead announce that I wanted to look at adopting an animal. I've taken in a fabulous sweetie of a cat and a poor abused doggo, but that's not important to the story. My neighbor was furious. Any day I reported them, I would wake up the next day to find something on my property wrong. Car broken into, faucet in the backyard turned on high, the gas in my grill left on, all kinds of stuff. I've tried everything, even getting PETA involved before I knew they were likely to put the dogs down. Eventually, the vicious dog was hit by a car. They immediately got a new dog. I reported them for not licensing it. When I spoke to the other neighbors, I let them know what was going on and encouraged them to report it as well. I'm very active in my community, and I've gotten to first-name basis with many, like the mayor, police chief, and so on. There was a sort of academy to get to know your city, and I took it, so I met a lot of people and have been volunteering, so they view me in a good light. Well, it's been a couple years, and my work is finally paying off. I got a call from a lawyer representing the county. She was bringing everything to the court and wanted me to testify. When she found out that I had a spreadsheet, pictures, and videos of everything, she nearly squealed with delight. My neighbor is currently being charged with reckless endangerment, being a public nuisance, animal cruelty, child endangerment, disturbing the peace, and I can't remember what else. The lawyer informed me that they were requesting the following. 1. they not be allowed to own any animals, ever. 2. The current animals be removed at once. 3. Due to the large number of complaints from the neighborhood and due to the varying types of complaints, they are to be deemed a public nuisance and removed from the county, never allowed to return. 4. Damages be paid to the neighborhood since we all lost many a flower garden to the dogs, plus all the time we had to spend cleaning the trash and the poop up. And number 5, jail time. Now, I confess, I didn't know it was possible to be banned from a city, never mind an entire county. It wasn't my intent. I just wanted those dogs rescued. They didn't deserve to be treated like that. Bonus. A few nights ago, I was legit concerned when I heard screaming and crashing from their house. I called the police. Evidently, they got the news about going to court and why, and it started an argument between husband and wife that evolved into a screaming and throwing things event, shattering their front window in the process. They only arrested the husband, who screamed the entire time that he was going to divorce her, and she would take the fall for the puppy mill by herself. I haven't seen him since, but a lawyer showed up at my door on accident looking for her. I looked her name up. She's a divorce lawyer.
I was in the U.S. Army and the Army National Guard for over 20 years. I did finally get my pension, but I was ready to throw all that time away because of the inability of a first lieutenant to count to 8. We had an annual APFT scheduled as part of a drill weekend. A drill weekend consisted of 4 unit training assemblies, or UTAs. Each UTA was equivalent to a day of active duty pay. The duty day started at 7 a.m., lunch at 12, final formation at 4:30 p.m., and then released for the day unless an overnighter was on the training schedule. Promotions were contingent on passing the Army Physical Fitness Test as well as a bunch of other random qualifications, such as military schools, professional development, military awards and decorations, rifle qualifications, civilian training and/or schooling, and college degrees. The APFT consisted of 3 events: push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. It has since been changed, but that was what it was when I was in. I'm a natural runner. I ran track in high school, tall and lean with good stamina. Not too fast, but I was steady, 6-minute miles all day long. Sit-ups were never really a problem for me. Push-ups, however, not much for upper body strength. I've always struggled with push-ups. It's the only event of the APFT that I ever actively trained. I could max out the other 2 events, but push-ups, I was happy if I could make the minimum required to pass the test. I was up for promotion. I trained push-ups for months prior to the test. On the day of the test, one of the smokers in the unit wanted to run with me, to pace off me so he could pass the PT test. I did the required number of push-ups to pass that event, and I was flying high, knowing the other 2 events were easy for me. We ran on a quarter-mile high school track, 8 laps for 2 miles, and as we passed our scorer, in this case, the idiot first lieutenant, we'd yell out our last name and he'd check off the completed lap. My buddy and I ran side by side for all 8 laps, and when we got to the last lap, the lieutenant said I had another one to do. We explained that we ran together for all 8 laps, and if one of us passed, both of us passed, but he wasn't buying it. He made a mistake and couldn't admit it. He was adamant that I had to run another lap, and because I was running slower than I normally would have to let the smoker keep up, I couldn't complete another lap in time required to pass the test. I was marked as a PT failure and wasn't eligible for promotion. Because I was an NCO, there wasn't that many slots that opened up in a year in my job classification. The opening went to another NCO further down the promotion list than me. I was ticked. My civilian job was in manufacturing. We worked a 3-on, 3-off schedule. I worked nights. Weekends were our big money weeks. In order to attend a drill weekend, I'd have to miss work Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday night. I would lose about $600 for attending drill. Occasionally, we could be approved for missing drill as long as we made it up during that month, or we could just take no pay for drill and miss those dates toward credible retirement. At some point, leadership decided that all PT failures would take a PT test every month until they passed. Failure to show up for a PT test would be an automatic forfeiture of pay and retirement points. Eligibility for retirement was based on having a good year. A good year was 50 points. Each UTA was 1 point. Annual training was 15 points, leaving 35 points needed from drill weekends. In a year, I could miss 3 drill weekends, and as long as I made all the rest, I was eligible for a good year. I saved those excused drills for the weeks that I was scheduled to work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I wouldn't lose the $600 difference from my civilian job in drill pay. Now, back to those mandatory PT tests every weekend. Leadership decided that we couldn't miss the scheduled training, so the PT test would be held before drill at 5:30 a.m. at an armory 30 miles further away from my unit's armory. To be at the PT test armory on time for the test meant that I had to get up at 3:30 a.m., get dressed, drive almost 2 hours, then do the test. Cue malicious compliance. If I was going to be inconvenienced by this idiocy, so was my score. I would show up for the test, sign in, do 1 push-up, 1 sit-up, 1 lap, and call it good. Drive to my unit and report that I failed the PT test, and go to work and still get paid. Every month. My first sergeant pulled me aside one day and asked what was going on. He said he knew I could pass the test. I explained that I already passed the test, but that the lieutenant never passed kindergarten counting. If they wanted to hold the PT test during duty hours, I'd be more than happy to try to pass, but there was zero incentive for me to do so as long as I had to drive 2 hours to take the test at 5:30 a.m. Another drill weekend, it snows quite a bit and it slows my drive down, so I get to the PT test a few minutes after it started. The LT in charge said it was too late and I couldn't start now. Okay, whatever. Drive to my unit to report in that I wasn't allowed to take the test. And then I'm informed I'm getting an unsat for refusing to do the PT test and wouldn't be paid for that UTA. Okay, if I'm not being paid, I'm leaving and will be back in 4 hours. Nope, if you leave, you'll get another unsat. I realize then, that means I don't have a good year. I'll only have 49 points. Screw it, I quit then. I had over 18 years in, re-enlisted for 6 more right before the failed PT test that I passed, and I just walked away. No more stupid chicken crap and no more losing money. In years past, some National Guard units were known to carry soldiers on their rolls. The unit would report that the soldiers were present for duty when they were not, and unit administrators would pocket their pay or create company slush funds. Sometimes, those soldiers were almost ready to collect pensions and were kicked out, and the state saved those pension payments. Now, after 18 years, soldiers are locked in and units are unable to discharge them. You can quit, like I did, and ask for a discharge, and the National Guard Bureau will kick it back, denying it like they did with me. I still had 4 years on my current enlistment. They wouldn't and couldn't release me. Meanwhile, the State National Guard Bureau would get a report of soldiers not showing up for drill. My name kept appearing. Uncomfortable questions were asked why someone with all this time in my rank would just walk away. My situation became an embarrassment for the state. How are they going to get my name off this report every month? Why did this happen? How did we fail a soldier with 1 year left until retirement eligibility? A friend of mine was a senior NCO, and in one of those meetings, he raised his hand and volunteered a way to get me off this list and not do anything illegal or fraudulent. I was transferred to his unit, and I attended drill at this unit just a few miles from my house on my days off during the week and reported to him. All I needed was 50 points, and that would give me a good year and I could retire with my 20 years in. I could also do military correspondence courses for retirement points, which wasn't available when I quit. When I attended enough UTAs and completed the courses, I got my 50 points. I received my eligibility for retirement letter, and I promised my friend that he could have half of it. Unfortunately, my friend passed away at age 55, a year or so after he finally retired after 30 plus years in uniform. At his funeral, another retired senior NCO spoke and reflected on my friend's ability to think outside the box and referenced my situation. Yes, I'm happily collecting my pension, but I'll never forget him and what he did for me.
Favorite teacher gets wrongfully fired, so I get 3/4 of the staff arrested. Posted by Edel1. I'll start off by saying this happened to my sister, and the actions taken were hers. My sister has always gotten along very well with her teachers, and has a habit of forming actual friendships with them, to the point that she still talks to her 5th grade English teacher, along with many others, decades later. This happened about 15 years ago. My sister was a student at Job Corps, which is a government-run live-on-campus vocational training program, studying hotel and motel management. She got on extremely well with her hotel-motel management teacher, better than pretty much every teacher she'd already had up to that point. One day, the teacher goes into the center dean's office and walks in on a paper shredding session. It turned out that there was some pretty major embezzling happening at the center, as in more than 60% of the funds for the center were being stolen. The teacher was appalled, and despite some rather lucrative offers made, refused to join in on these acts. Less than a week later, the teacher was fired for trumped-up reasons. This was especially bad given the teacher was only 2 years away from retiring, and being fired lost their retirement package. Needless to say, my sister was ticked. Knowing how things typically work and that almost any report she tried to make would just be swept under the rug if it was taken seriously at all, she came up with a plan and took things nuclear. Over the next month or two, my sister managed to gather some basic evidence of the embezzling. Nothing concrete, but enough to warrant considerable investigation by the authorities. She took the little evidence she was able to gather, along with the story of what happened to her teacher, and sent the info in an email to the Job Corps regional director. Now, like I said, she knew that her email would likely be ignored, or in the event swept under the rug, so she got smart. The email was CC'd to every single major person in the Job Corps chain of command, all the way up to the national director, as well as to anyone even tangentially related to Job Corps in the upper echelons of the Department of Labor, and every member of Congress, as well as the U.S. President's office. Remember, this was a government-run program. All in all, the email was sent to over 2,000 people. Basically, she not only sent the report, but sent it in such a way that everyone who got it could also see everyone else who got it, and she sent it to way more people than would be needed to ensure the issue couldn't be swept under the rug. 2 weeks later, after the investigation finished, I've never seen the government work so fast on anything that wasn't collecting owed taxes, only 5 or 6 staff members out of the 20-ish that worked in the center still had their jobs. And at least 5 of the ones fired, including the dean, were facing major criminal charges, with the rest facing minor charges. I'm not sure of the exact figure on how much was stolen, but it was well into the 7 digits, because the embezzling had been happening for years. The teacher got a very nice severance package post-investigation. If I remember correctly, it was 3 years of pay, her full retirement package, and signing an NDA, although she didn't get her job back. And my sister was given her completion certificate despite not having finished the requirements of the course. They wanted her gone, but they couldn't kick her out. Let me preface this by saying that I'm now out of college, but this encounter still plays vividly in my head every so often. I'm also not sure if this counts as pure revenge, because I'm sure what happened was illegal, but nonetheless, it's not entirely insane. When I was in the 4th grade, my teacher had it out for every boy in her classroom. For the sake of the story, let's call her Miss Karen. So, Miss Karen would teach us in a manner that favored all of the girls in her class, but she gave the boys no sympathy and treated us like human garbage. To start this, our desks in elementary school were the ones with little cabinets directly next to us, so we could easily get our things out whenever we needed to. Anyways, if we ever couldn't find our homework or whatever absurd thing she asked for, she would get some of the girls from class to grab our desks, tip them over, and go through all of our belongings in search of what she wanted from us. Even if it was one single boy in the class, every other boy would get their desk tipped. In the process of this, she would stop teaching the entire class and make everyone else watch us get humiliated whenever it happened. There were even times when she would make up something that needed to be done so that she could have an excuse to go through our things. At the end of the day, I was the kid who was targeted more than anyone else in that class, and to this day, I still don't know why. When it came to me, Miss Karen would constantly degrade me in front of all of the students, turn me down when I asked for help, and make the girls go through my desk even when we weren't turning in an assignment. Every day, I would come home and tell my parents how awful school was and how Miss Karen would bully me. and they brushed it off. I can't say I really blame them. I did have some trouble in school before this, but that's not the point. It was like I was constantly being searched for contraband in her dang class, and nothing I ever did was good enough for her. Miss Karen has even worse tendencies than this though. Her signature move was to corner whoever she was berating and literally grab them by the shirt and yell at them for their very minor mistakes. Miss Karen loved doing this to the boys not listening in her class. Not only would she corner us to do this, but she wouldn't even try to hide it from the class. This would happen in the middle of her teaching us, and she would have a crap-eating grin every time this occurred. I still kept bringing this up to my parents, and finally my dad started to listen to me. He talked to the school, and they said that they'd be looking into it. After that, Miss Karen completely lost it. She would target only me, and mainly for things that were so minor, it didn't even make sense. I remember specifically I asked my friend for a pencil, and as soon as she heard that, she stands up and says, "Do you seriously not have a pencil, Havix? This is school. How stupid are you?" And then commands the girls to dump my desk and search for one. After more than a semester of all of this verbal abuse and constant humiliation, I decided to try and do something about it. I told my dad once again about all that had been going on, and he finally realized that the school administration wouldn't work. So we went out and bought a little recorder. This was back in 2007, so cheap recorders were still kind of clunky and big, so I couldn't really hide it too well. Fast forward into the week, and I've been trying to record Miss Karen for a few days to gather my evidence, and she calls on me to answer the questions she's asking the class. I didn't know the answer, so once again, she began to degrade me while commanding the girls to flip my desk and go through my things. This is where she saw my recorder, took it, and literally whispered in my ear, "Nice try, dummy." I crap you not, she said that to the 4th grade me. This was the final straw. I told my dad what Miss Karen did and said to me, and he called the school immediately. Not wanting to give her an opportunity to make things worse on me, he arranged a parent-teacher meeting after school on the following Friday, and it was one of the greatest days of my life. On the day of the meeting, she kept her cool for the most part and didn't really act out in her normal ways. She didn't yell, have anyone scolded, or degrade any of us. I think she knew something was about to happen and just wanted to play nice for the day to cool down. As soon as class ended for the day, my dad was waiting in the school lobby for me, and as soon as every other student left, we walked back into the classroom. Miss Karen greeted my dad with a warm smile, letting him know that she was happy to have a meeting and assess my school behavior. My dad is the type of person that takes absolutely no crap from anyone. Miss Karen started to tell him that I tend to act out, make obscene comments, and talk through her lessons throughout the day. And when my dad interrupted her and said, "No, I don't need to hear your BS story that you just made up to make my son look like the problem here. I want to know why you make it a goal to bully him. Can you explain that to me?" I have never seen Miss Karen make a face like she did in that moment. She started to talk again, and he stands up, interrupts her again. "Actually, why is it that you only bully the boys in class? Why do you get in their faces?" Miss Karen is completely silent at this point, unsure of what she can do next. This is when crap gets real. My dad literally grabs her shirt, pulls her close, gets in her face, and says, "This doesn't feel so comfortable, does it?" Miss Karen very quietly agreed and said, "No, this isn't very comfortable." And for a final blow, my father lets her go, flips her whole effing desk over, dumping all of her crap over and breaking a lot of it on the way down. He grabs me and pushes me out of the door, but looks at her before we leave and says, "If you ever even touch my effing son again, I will go out of my way to absolutely destroy your pathetic life." From that day on, Miss Karen was as nice as can be, never said anything mean to me or any of the boys again, and my dad took me out to McDonald's to celebrate. She even gave back my recorder the next school day. Definitely a win in my book.
HOA secrets exposed, tax evasion, fraud, and extortion. How I uncovered it. Find out how by clicking on the video on the screen. You don't want to miss this story, and I will see you there.